Hello, everybody here? We're joining this evening Jack Devine of Artist Circle, Fine Arts, who will take us on a tour of public art found in Montgomery County. Among other topics, the talk will touch on the types of art, the artist, and how the pieces came to be, and the significance of the site, to the site. Please welcome Jack Devine.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I'm excited to be here. I don't present very often except for to clients, and since none of you are buying 14-foot sculptures, I assume this is gonna be a new avenue for me. But anyway, I'd like to thank the committee and for Diana inviting me. For all the tech guys, Dave and Jesse, for helping me get set up here. My beautiful wife down here in this corner who came to see me, Joanna. Yay, exactly. So as Diana said, I'm an art consultant. I help people with um, anything that has to do with art, really. I do a lot of public sculpture, which public art could be sculpture, but it is usually artwork that's in an exterior, open to everybody's viewing versus inside an office or a hospital or something like that. So I'm going to go through a lot of different projects that our company has done over the past 40, 50 years. And I'm sure if you have questions, we're just going to have a little period at the end. I would normally ask people to just shout out, but I don't think that's a good idea. So um, I'm going to start just with my little title slide, just because it made me think of it. But what you're looking at is a terrazzo, which is sort of an ancient method of mosaic. And when the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission built their headquarters in Silver Spring back in the late 50s, it's since been demolished and they moved out to Wheaton. They had this map of the county put in the floor. So when you came into the hearing room to pitch your development or whatever your housing subdivision, you would walk right over the map of Montgomery County. But the most interesting thing, besides the fact I had to get it out of the ground and into their new building, was that the map is inaccurate. At some point in like 62, we gave, I don't know how many acres, but a bunch of acres to PG. And so that map is not the real Montgomery County. I think it's somewhere right down in there. So kind of fascinating. I didn't know it, but and I don't have features of this project, but this project, it's made up of thousands of little pieces of marble, and we had to get it out of the ground by jacking all around it, underpinning it, lifting it up, taking out a wall of the building. All the time, I'm thinking this thing is going into 1,000 puzzle pieces. But I had a great mason and a great fabricator, and we got it into the building. So I'm a Montgomery County born and bred resident. Our company's in Montgomery County. We have 4 kids. They live in 4 different states. And we live in a historic home in North Potomac for the past 25 years. So I'm going to get going here. This is a little bit about our company. We have a staff of 5 people. We help people with all kinds of artwork, not just public sculptures or public art. You don't need to know about our people, except for we do have fun. So, oh, look, I got the same shirt on. Oh, no, I don't. Almost. Reverse shirt. Yeah, so things we would do, like on the left side, when we're wearing masks for COVID, that was a Black Lives Matter quilt that hangs in the same county office building in Silver Spring where the terrazzo map went. It was something that was a collaboration of different people in the county. The fellow on the left is standing on top of a piece of art that had not yet gone up on the wall. There'll be more pictures of it later. It's made up of thousands of cut up street signs. And then on the left, there's one of my Mason friends. about to put the Baltimore Oriole down in the ground, a mosaic by a nonprofit. So let's go here once I get the buttons straight. This is our barn, and Dave Reiser, the organizer here, his son lives right across the street from me. I find out today, so that was kind of fun. Our offices are in the barn. It's from 1885. And this is the interior of the barn. We have sometimes art shows in there. So, and they're nice parties. I'll get onto the public art in a minute, but this is the type of other projects that we do. This is a painter who's did a very large painting, not as large as this, and then we scanned it with photography and printed it as wallpaper and put it back out. So it was sort of an original piece. It went in a office from Microsoft. This client wanted a representation of the Seychelles Islands where they were born. And so this artist, our friend Margaret Boozer over on the left, made this 1,000-piece representation out of clay of the Seychelles. Not public at all. This is an office building. We do very large pieces sometimes if people request them. There's a painter that went to Maryland Institute there in the middle, Nicole. It took us a while to get those up since we couldn't bring them in the front door. We had to build them inside the building. What's next? We also do little pieces. These are little bitty sculptures that went into a law firm. That crazy thumb thing, I don't know what that's about. They chose it though. All right, I keep hitting the wrong button here, sorry. This was in a science institute, so it might just be photography, this photography of different scientists. So I put in a couple of things at the beginning to talk about what public art is, and it can have a very wide range. It's really anything that is artwork that you can experience. One of the first kind of most famous pieces of art was by a fellow, Richard Serra. If anybody's ever been to Glenstone, the museum nearby, there's a huge spiral piece you can walk inside of, and this is the same artist. So he put this piece up in the late 70s, early 80s in New York City. Nobody believed that it was art, and about 4 or 5 years later, the city tore it down because so many people were complaining about it. They didn't understand abstract art. They couldn't see the fountain. It blocked their light when they were having lunch. So art can be controversial. This is public art from a day back in the day, you know. So there's lots of different interpretations. That's George Washington on top of his horse, obviously. And that was sort of what we would think of as an early version of public art. This is John Chester French's studio up in Massachusetts. He designed the Lincoln Memorial. So again, what gets interpreted as public art nowadays has changed a great deal from back in the day when it was more memorializing things. Nowadays, public art can be mammoth, like the bean in the top left corner there, very famous in Chicago, or that in that same plaza, that tower with the person's face that has video projection on it. It has fountains built into it, so water will come shooting out of her mouth at different times of the day. It's quite fascinating. It's got an enormous amount of plumbing on the inside of it. So, but the bean cost, I think, $25 million. It cost, I think, another 5 or 10 less when they started, and then he went to Mayor Daley and said, I need more money. So most of the pieces I handle do not cost $25 million. But there, it's a gorgeous, really fascinating piece. Anish Kapoor. But a lot of art that you see as public art now is more freestanding sculptures. This is a Los Angeles artist, Brad Howe. We've put in a couple of pieces of his locally. He works in painted and welded steel. Some pieces are intended to have a message or some kind of thematic connection. Most of Brad's pieces are just colorful and happy, like you're looking in and kind of experiencing it now. These pieces were made by an artist, B. Gardner, from Chicago and Tennessee. And it's called yeah, I've had something to do with angels. But anyway, they're carved out of Tennessee marble, and then the faces are out of a Carrara marble from Italy. And this went in a. This is not a Montgomery County piece. This is over in Alexandria. A lot of public art these days is murals. Um, this piece happens to be by James Ballou, who was born and raised in Rockville. He lives in Berlin and he does murals, often figurative like this, all over the world. And he periodically comes back. His dad was my swim coach at Rockville Pool when I was a kid, so he's pretty well known. But murals, because they're relatively affordable, they're easy. They're often sort of a go-to that our clients are looking for, and you can kind of capture anything with them, like a painting. This is another version of sorts, and I'm straying from Montgomery County for a moment. These pieces are cut out of stainless steel, and they're representative of all kinds of historic buildings in Alexandria, Virginia. So they're all screwed to the wall individually. But that was it's actually a French artist, and I needed to send him a lot of pictures of DC and Alexandria because he really had no idea. The mural answer is often a fun, an easy way to take a sound wall that might be on the side of a highway and creating something a little more exciting with it, like these dogwood flowers. Here's an example of the artist was still painting. You can see down there in the bottom where her spray cans are. I know she had help. Most muralists have help when they do their work because of the scale of it. Often they'll set up in the evening with a really large projector and project whatever the image is, like these flowers, onto the wall, and then go trace them, and then come back after they've made the outlines and paint in the daytime. That's a common practice. This is at a Kaiser hospital, just and again to be sort of light and upbeat. There's other kinds of public art as well. This is a projection piece by Joyce Lee, who's sort of a light and internet artist. So the idea of the water reflected up on the ceiling on the inside of the building. And some art can even be inside. It really depends on who's deciding what's public or what's not. This is a building over on Wooten Parkway. It's a painter from Connecticut. Okay, so how does this public art get to where it gets? Typically, what happens is most public art is required by a municipality, like the city of Gaithersburg, or the city of Rockville, or Maryland National Park and Planning Commission will tell the real estate developer, you're going to build 50 townhouses or a condominium building to give back to the community. You've got to give us some artwork to kind of engender your commitment to the place where the building is being put up. So we will often get a floor plan like this of where the site is going to be, and then we have to find where the art can fit in. In this instance, we also get all kinds of other things that are going to be happening around the site, like the chairs and the walls and the paving and the bike racks and everything else that might be sort of the visual vocabulary of what's going to happen on the site, so that we're able to make sure that the artwork has some kind of connection and with the other elements that the architect usually, in combination with the client and the developer, have picked out. So for this particular project, the client had an old retail development that they were trying to kind of not make so high end. They wanted it more approachable. And they said they wanted kids to be able to go around and really enjoy the sculpture that went in. So we showed them a fair amount of different sculptors, but they ended up with Kevin Box here. He lives out in Arizona. He does a lot of origami turned into sculpture. So he's a master origamiist. If I didn't know that thing existed until we did this project. He even does collaborative pieces with other origami artists. So a lot of his pieces, if you saw one somewhere, you'd probably recognize it because it has that origami vocabulary. We picked out, I think it was 6 sites on the development, and this is right down at the corner of Western and Wisconsin in Chevy Chase, where there would be places to people to wander, those sort of um, turquoise lines you see wandering around through here are supposed to be people's pathways if they were walking from store to store or to the office building. So where you might sort of encounter something or be surprised perhaps, that's where we decided on where to put the pieces. And we showed a lot of different animals, but they arrived on these ones that we're seeing now. So there's a gathering place in the middle of it, and they wanted the biggest one, which is that giant uh, caterpillar there that you can get on top of, just like that child looks to be, right in the middle of it. And then there was a turtle that you can. They wanted a turtle because of the University of Maryland, so we got the tortoise. He's going there. So there were models made along the way. These are all cast out of bronze. So that's kind of the oldest, most permanent of sculpture mediums. It's pretty impervious to weather. It could need to be repatinated every once in a while. But then Kevin went to town with clay. So he makes actual life size sculptures out of clay with some studio assistants. And then those get shipped to the foundry, and the foundry takes all the molds off of them and goes through the whole lost wax process and casts the actual pieces. So there's your little turtle, your little caterpillar. The bird, he's a lot bigger than a bluebird, but he's on a post, a little on a long pathway. And then the squirrel was the cutest, and it came with its little nut. He's only about maybe 2 feet tall, but and the owl looks down from up above over top of everyone. You can kind of see the origami aspect of all of them. This is a similar type of project where this is in Rockville. It's a building that opened about 2 years ago, I guess. We worked with a local group, Washington Glass School, and Tim Tate, who was born in Rockville, is a pretty famous glass artist. They were naming the building after Ansel Adams. I'm not sure where that came from, but so they wanted the art to be thematically connected to the name of the building. We ended up putting a piece at this corner here and another one down at that corner. We had done a previous building, that one in the back, and had pieces on those corners from 5 years earlier. So we kind of kept that rhythm as it went down the street. The artist put together some really great proposals about the source material they were planning to use. The 2 pieces in the top right and left that are colorful, that's their normal way of working. They cast glass in, you'll see in a moment, in a sort of a big oven. And they were pulling imagery. There's Ansel on top of his Woody at the bottom that he used often to get a good perspective, and some of his famous photographs and scattered about. So they were going to do that. Plus, they wanted other aspects of photography to be included in the pieces. So they did a design. There's sort of these pyramidal forms, and then at the top of each one of them was a cast version, like a bronze version of the Woody, and the as a capital, and then the other one was a famous house that Ansel liked to shoot. They're internally lit. You'll see in a moment. So on the left, they took a famous Half Moon over Hernandez photograph that Ansel had shot and sort of recreated it in glass on the right. The nice thing about this is the way these cast pieces happen is you take an icon and you press it into this very, very fine clay powder. It's almost like flour. It's that light, and then you put a sheet of glass on top of it. When the furnace goes on, it melts down into the form, so you get that the negative that you make turns into a positive. Because there were so many panels between the two shapes, other things could happen in there. So they invited the three real estate developers that are standing there in their shirts to bring things that they wanted. So one guy brought the Death Star for some reason. He was really into Star Wars. Another guy brought like a fleur de lis because it was on his state flag back in Connecticut. Somebody else did their college ring. And so because there were, I don't know, 100 different images in the sculpture, their pieces got included also. Just kind of fun to get them involved. So there the pieces are lit up. You can see they did some interesting things like the Instagram logo. I had a whole box of old cameras from my parents, and I gave them that, and they just pushed those down into that sand. So you have different Polaroid and different historic cameras represented as well. And that's just some details. They even took a camera and their hands, as you can see in that top right one, and pushed it right into the sand and then cast it. You can see the Death Star down at the bottom. I don't know what that does to cameras, but I brought Gumby and Pokey along, but he did not make it, but they made one for me anyway. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what forms that public art can take. Freestanding sculpture is sort of the standard when you think about public art and sculpture. But murals are very common nowadays. Mosaics a little more complicated, but it's dynamic. We've done a lot of art that was seating, sculpture that was intended to be sat upon. But there's wall-mounted pieces, fountains, more light-oriented things are quite popular with some artists. So these are some mosaics over off Shady Grove in Rockville. We're still installing the one on the right. They were made on panels by a woman from Ashton, and so they were on a outdoor panel that we could screw through onto the wall. They're really just leaf forms, not really intended to be a symbolic or anything. This is what I was showing earlier. This is up at the corner of 355 and Quince Orchard. There was a new warehouse development there. This was through the city of Rockville. There's a sculpture in the center of the circle with 3 panels that I'll show you later. But around the perimeter are the 5 mosaics of the life cycle of the Baltimore Oriole. And it was a Maryland-based developer, so they really were wanting to tie it to Maryland. And that was interesting because we worked with a nonprofit in Silver Spring that engages young men and women between, I think, 16 and 22, and they design and make the mosaics. So then, we take it from, we work with them, with the developers. These are some other panels that they had done on the side of a bank, and tell them what exactly the client's looking for, and they go through a similar design process that a professional artist would, and show things and do edits, and then come back and they physically cut all the little pieces up and build them, and then we come and take them and install them. This is the opposite end of the scale. This is actually in Reston, Virginia, but this artist designed this piece, and then there's 3 of these, and they're 37 feet long. So a mosaic company up in Rhode Island made it and shipped it down, and we installed it. So it's kind of the more corporate end of things. It has all kinds of iconography about the city of Reston in it, but it's not Montgomery County. Murals, we have lots of mural requests these days. This is a pair of artists from Baltimore. That's kind of looking down on it. That's kind of their color palette. But they painted on the wall. They painted on the ground. They painted up the side of the basketball court. This is over at Ingleside at King Farm. So it's an outdoor courtyard. This artist, Michael Servet, does perforated metal. So he has just hundreds, thousands of holes drilled in metal. But the center is a representation of a certain section of the Potomac River, abstracted. And then it's painted, powder coated. Most of the time, when we're putting pieces outside, we have to worry about their longevity. We have to make sure that wall can support them. The piece of art was quite heavy. Um, and make sure we can access the space at the time we need to. Lots of mechanical and sort of logistical issues that we deal with. This was another simple form. This is actually, this is over on Halpine in Rockville next to Congressional Shopping Center. Blacksmith, a woman blacksmith from Idaho made these. And it was just this nice, simple, they're, I guess, 2 feet each of the flowers. And there wasn't a lot of room to put the art, so we had to deal with a kind of small, intimate space. This was the piece I showed earlier where the fellow was walking on top of the art. So they wanted a piece on the side of this parking garage. So thematically, there's an artist that I'm friends with up in Rhode Island, Boris Bali. He's from, his family's from Switzerland. He's a jeweler too, but he works a lot with recycled signs. So he'll buy used signs by the ton from a state or a county organization that are no longer useful to them anymore. They've taken them down, and then he cuts them up and turns them into all things. So chairs, furniture, things that go on the wall. This is the biggest piece he had ever done. There's something like 950 of these panels cut out of signs, and they're all hung on a cable that runs across, so you can start to see the yield and the stop sign. But the the, the client was very excited because we had something obviously transportation oriented on the side of a parking garage. Not too many artists work in street signs. We get a fair amount of requests for seating, art that is seating. So this art is from California. This is also in Rockville, works with stainless steel rod and makes a variety of chairs. On the same site, this is a Puerto Rican artist just around the corner from the one we just looked at, and she makes these small benches. These are all kind of in a little bus zone, so it's a place where you can just kind of rest for a moment. These two they're not in Montgomery County, but they're interesting in that they're both made out of recycled material. If you all the plastic milk jugs that the guys take away when the truck drives by your house, or the piece on the right is entirely made of recycled plastic from milk jugs. So we had an artist paint on that piece after we received it, and that was her method of working. And then the fellow on the left actually buys old LP propane tanks that people used to have in their backyard in more rural areas, the big 8-foot white tanks. He buys them and he cuts them up and he welds them back together and paints them. So if you kind of imagine the curves of the tank, and this is actually a seating piece too, over there in the middle. Where's my little thing? Oh yeah, right in there, there's a seat for 3 different people. So it's a little bit hidden, but it's kind of a fun discovery also. These pieces went in front of the Discovery Channel's old headquarters in Silver Spring. This is right before I took them off the truck. So when the Discovery Channel moved to New York, their building was sold, and the new owner wanted to pay some respect to Shark Week, which was a big Discovery Channel thing. So we commissioned these pieces by Joe O'Connell out in Arizona, who we've done several things with, to create these seats. And If you look carefully in them, there they are, set up in the plaza in front of the building on Georgia Avenue. If you look carefully, you can see all these creatures that he cut into the steel before it got painted. And that was, they enjoyed that sort of reference to all the animals that would show up during Shark Week. We get a lot of odd requests, believe me. This is just around the corner off of Shady Grove. This was the headquarters for the American Speech and Hearing Learning Association. So a bunch of speech pathologists work in this building, and they wanted their art to reflect that. So this piece, when you're sitting down, kind of like at a children's playground sometime, right on here, there's a speaking horn. And if you put your ear over here, or your friend does, you can talk to them through those pipes. And for them, it was, again, a nice tie to what it is that they did in their work life. Another project where it was the railings were created by an artist in Richmond. So sometimes, if there's no place on the site for me to put a mural or to put a freestanding sculpture, we're able to incorporate it as a downspout or some other architectural feature. This is in Bethesda. There was a fountain there. It was there for about 15 years, and the facilities guy got sick of cleaning it, and he tore it down. The art police were not happy with that. So the new developer said, there's supposed to be art there. I got to get art there. So this was a piece that Margie Hutto made. She's from upper state New York, and it kind of represented the four seasons in a manner. But each one of those pieces was individually fired, so it took the guy about a week to install them. Another instance where they wanted it architecturally incorporated, and they had taken out another piece of art. So the obligation was for the art to always be there when you install it. Because often, as I was explaining to some friends at dinner with Diana, some municipalities will say, okay, you're building 50 townhouses. I multiply that by X amount of dollars, and here's your art budget. Some municipalities will say $75,000, that's your art budget. It wouldn't matter what you did with it. Sometimes, though, it's sort of a amenities trade. Like if they got to put a couple of extra floors on an office building, then the county would say, okay, we're letting you do that, but now you got to really put in art. So they're never going to take those floors off that building, so that art as a balance has to always be there. So these folks had taken out some artwork, and they needed to put artwork back in. This is a painter, actually, from Virginia. This is in Silver Spring, as you can see. And what we did was he took his paintings digitally and sort of cut them up on the computer. And then we printed them out on a long lifespan plexiglass, and then it got sandwiched in between pieces of glass that went into the railing. It was sort of a kind of tech involved process, but it worked well. It goes all the way up and around the upper floor. This piece by Joyce Lee is actually a projection piece on a cast glass piece. There's Joyce there with us. And that's interior, and that municipality said that was okay. Usually the art has to be outside like this. This is in Rockville. This was a modeling exercise the artist would do on his computer to explain what the artwork is going to look like in the long run. And there it is installed. It's about 8 feet tall. It's cut in flat material and then bent. And it's in several languages, reflecting the demographic of the people in Rockville. It's painted on the interior, and most people don't know it, but right over here is a little button, and you can change the color of the internal lighting inside. So sometimes it's blue, green, purple. It reverts to one color, but I don't know how many people know to push the button. But it's big. That's my family. Okay. And this piece actually moves. It's a wind vane of sorts. It has um, a mechanism inside that allows it to spin. It's a Baltimore artist, Marianne Mears. I didn't want to leave out the artists when I'm talking about this, but uh, sometimes we're heavily involved with them. Sometimes they come and meet with the clients or come and see the site. Other times, not at all. It really depends on a lot of different things, partially the budget sometimes. But this is Narcissus Quagliata. He did the big mural on the side of Discovery Channel's building that runs down Colesville toward the metro. And this is him working in his studio um, and in Mexico. That is not a slide that, oh, I know, I'm jumping around, sorry. So let me back up. I didn't hit the backup button here. So on the left, Tom Fruin is there installing something. In the middle, Boris Bally brought a little machine so he could cut those extra tiles if they didn't fit. And so he was on site for a week or so with his assistant. Paul Sori came in from Seattle because all the branches of that tree were separate and he welded them on site together. This just went in last week in the middle of Bethesda. The site is still under construction, as you can see, but Cheryl Foster, the artist from Bowie, is there in her pink hard hat. The piece is called The Gleaning. It's about, it has kind of a deco feel to it to reflect the architecture of the building, but also it has something to do, it has to do with her African American heritage and her the top forms that you can't really see are abstracted representation of tobacco leaves from her ethnic heritage. There's covering on it now till the construction site is finished, and then we'll go back and peel it off. It's a really bright polished stainless steel, and there are lights above it when the site's done. This is Tom Fruin. We're doing a really cool piece with him that I'll show you at the end. He uses plexiglass panels to make kind of a stained glass effect in different shapes. But he's come to town a couple of times for things we've done with him. This is inside our barn. This was a piece Danny Lane from England came with his glass piece, except for he forgot to clean it when it left England. So we spent a day in the freezing cold cleaning his glass. So, okay, so the selection process happens, like I said, with Narcissus. They go through, he did very large watercolors of the art he was going to make. Then that got scanned, and then it got sort of baked onto these metal panels in a furnace, kind of like a car body would be in the old days. Um, these were going on the outside of a building, and they're very large, so they were backed with concrete. It was really a building skin material. There it is, kind of on opening day. It's like 185 feet long. But it has a lot of story in it about the beginning of time all the way through um, the space age. Jackson Pollock's in it. He put all kinds of things into it. Except for at the very end, at the opening, Narcissus Quagliata. Okay, I get his first name, Narcissus. So he says, Jack, come down here. And I like he walks me way down to the end here, right in this section. It's at the lower end of the site, and it's almost 15 feet tall there. I'm like, what, Narcissus? He goes, look up there. And I go, what is that? He goes, that's my face. And I'm like, Narcissus, no way. Yeah, I put it in there. I'm like, oh God. Anyway, he's a character. This sometimes happens where we can't get people off the dime. This is a facility out in Virginia, but we made this sculpture out of foam core and paint because the client just could not understand how big and what it was going to look like. So there's my somewhat unruly staff because it was 95 degrees out while we're holding this thing up. And the client was over like there in that plaza drinking mint juleps, calling us on the phone saying, move it to the left, move it to the right. Clifford was about to jump in their lake. Anyway, sometimes that's just what we have to do to get people to understand it. And this is the actual piece before it left where DeLoss lives out in the California hills. So it comes on a truck like this all the way across country on a flatbed. We've got to pick it with a crane. We already determined where the footprint of the footers where it gets bolted down, and so it's a process. You can't really see, but there's a lake between the folks eating lunch and the red Nessie. But again, often we'll get a site plan like this. It often doesn't have much room for art. This one had the metro line running behind it. So first they wanted a painting, a mural on the metro wall. Metro said no, you can't paint on my wall. Um, so even though we went through a couple of really cool iterations of how that would look, this is James Blue again. He hires models before he does his painting to get into certain figurative forms, so he has accuracy when he actually goes and paints his painting. What they ended up doing was there was a big sound wall they had to build to block the sound of the metro train going by, and they decided to treat that instead because it was out of Metro's purview. So we ended up working with an artist from Toronto, Dave Hind. That's his maquette, his design in the bottom there. He works with a very unusual material in Canada. You can put like flat aluminum siding on the side of your house, but it comes in a lot of different colors. Um, and if you carve into it, it's aluminum on the inside. So basically, if you scratch it, you get a drawing. So he projected that tree and then sat there with a dental tool and a lot of friends actually and drew into the metal. And then he would just use the blank panels as contrast also. And then we are slowly screwing it to the wall over the entire thing. It's two of my sons helping out there. We got a family business going. Um, there we are on the lift progressing along. Some artists have very sort of professional demeanors, and Dave, the guy in the blue shirt, he sends the art and it's stacked and stacked and stacked on this truck. And we start pulling it apart, and he separated them all with like his old blue jeans. Like they're just like we had this huge pile of clothes when we're all done. Some people would, they'd have special protection and all this. It depends on the artist. Here's another piece that went into Rockville. So this came on a really big truck, and we crated it off, and then we just had to turn it sideways and put it in the little plaza over there. So a lot more simple, even though it's large. We get a lot of requests for theme things. This was actually one would call it is a public art piece, but it wasn't required by anybody. So the client just said, I have this big blank wall. I'd like to do something more interesting with it. We'd like to get, it's a retail center. Can we get the sort of a community theme? So the artist, Katie Giganti, started coming up with ideas of connectiveness. And so she would Photoshop all these different ideas of hers onto the wall. And then she does a lot of murmurations, the kind of clouds of starlings that you see in the bottom right there. That's kind of her natural work. And then eventually they decided on design. So again, projecting at night, marking it out, then painting. And the piece is it has quince trees because it's near Quince Orchard Road. If you knew to look, all those little white lines are maps of the roads, the major roads in the area. But you'd have to kind of figure that out on your own. There's no, sort of directional signage about it, which is kind of fun, discovery aspect. There's a piece that we did with Jim Sanborn in Bethesda. He's kind of known for these light projection spheres. A lot of history and things about the native peoples and different kinds of elements in the text. Obviously, the light projects through there, and the text goes down onto the ground plane. They gave him a fair amount of free, liberal, pretty liberal with the site. He also sandblasted other text into seating walls and into the ground. And then he put more panels of that text material out toward Rockville Pike there. But these are all made out of patinaed copper. So again, a little less permanent in bronze, but still pretty long lasting. This was a site that had science oriented tenants near there and also retail, but they wanted something approachable, but still maybe having to do with discovery. So this artist works in wire, and so for him, he thought it'd be, this person has a little magnifying glass and they're looking at a butterfly. Obviously, that person has a telescope. This person has a little pinwheel that actually spins, so it's more about physics. So, and they're sited in different areas around. This was a little bit extreme, but there used to be a Dodge dealership on this site, Reed Dodge. And the person that built the condominium was really into Dodges. So we hired a designer from Detroit who had worked on cars before. And again, we said, okay, what are you going to do? So he came up with a design. Oops, I went the wrong way. This is actually an amalgamation of 4 different classic Dodge front ends with their lights. You'd have to really be a car nut to be pulling the 3 or 4 of them out of there, but I trusted them. The top thing that looks like a headlight lights up at night. It doesn't beam, but it's kind of lit around the perimeter by LEDs. So does that smaller element in the left. On the right, this piece up here was a light fixture he had rescued out of an old car factory that was getting demolished. And he turned those into pistons, as you can see, that became the lights that ran along the side of the roadway. So this fellow wanted car art, and he got it. This is Tower Oaks over off of 270. It was a new development, but it's all surrounded by woods and a golf course on one side. And they really were proud of the fact they were sort of, keeping a lot of trees and making it sort of a little urban pocket in the woods. And they wanted, if they could, to have animals incorporated. So this artist, Dale Rogers, does a lot of that. So I think there's 14 pieces. Most of them are small. That fox is only about 3 feet long. That are located all around. And again, it's kind of a discovery. They used a lot of indigenous plants in the planting. And so that's what you got, little birds popped here and there. This is just up at the corner. I showed you those mosaics earlier. This is when we met with the young men and women who make the mosaic. Those developers came in and met with the kids, I call them. And there we are installing. So the 3 pieces in the center were referencing the history of Gaithersburg through different periods of agriculture. You can kind of see the 270 sign right there. And then there's some like biotech type of things as to the current status. This is it in the fabricator's shop. So a lot of artists don't what you'd call make their own art. They don't have huge machine shops. They don't have laser cutters. They don't have foundries. So they collaborate with people that do that. And here we are installing it before the landscape went in. And there it is with some of the landscaping. I have a pet peeve about trees. People plant them right in front of my sculptures, and I can't see the sculpture 5 years later, but I can't control that. This is typical for a bigger piece. We have to have a crane. This piece came in from LA, all wrapped up. We got to pick it off of there. We got to put it back down straight. And then we got to set it over here in place and bolt it down. So that is about a day. And the only couple of things I was going to talk about is just longevity. This particular piece, there were 2 of these made. They were at the other end of that same block that had the lit Ansel Adams triangles. There were 2 of them by Brower Hatchard. And but there they are at night. which is nice. They have kind of a reference to the Deco movie theater. They're not really lit; those are just uplights, and he uses like the old reflectors you used to have on your bike. It's that same kind of material that catches light, but it's not internally lit per se. But one day, somebody's not paying attention with their car, and somebody was there that said that car went 3 feet up before it went down, which I felt good about because it was pretty strong sculpture. So, but we had to get over there quickly, cut it in half because it was blocking traffic. And then Brower had to make a new one. He made it even stronger. But that's the kind of thing we have to be conscious of. For murals, people, they do their explanation because they're not always going to be there. The artists leave. And these are just a couple of pieces that are coming soon. We haven't installed them yet. This is Tom Fruin, who I referenced earlier. There is a development on 355 over by the dump. It's next to a historic Montgomery County farm. And Tom is making a big windmill. So the top, the mechanism it's not really pictured in there, but right in the middle, like right here, it's an actual windmill mechanism. So it's going to move around with the wind. It'll turn different directions, but it'll all be covered with his sort of patented kind of stained glassy forms. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's going in the spring. I guess April, March. This is a mural going on the side of a building that is, again, with muralists, they can only paint up to about the middle of October, and then it's just too cold for the paint to adhere properly, especially if they're using different types of paint. This piece is kind of interesting in that if you see here, there's a woman's arm and her head. She's kind of twisted like this. That was a specific request. The building actually bends. That little white break there in the middle is perpendicular corner. And then I think there's just one more. This is going in on Montrose near, if you ever noticed the Kaiser Permanente office building there. There's a row of townhouses with a little park on the end. And this piece is going in again early next year. But it'll be nice. It's very nicely lit. And that's it. I think we have a question period. Thank you. Uh-oh, there's people with questions over there. I'm going to get some water, excuse me.
You have one over on this side.
Okay, I'm ready. Thanks, Dave.
That was very nice. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Someone's asking about vandalism, and we don't get as much of that as you would think. The easy thing to fix is murals. Sculptures are much harder to fix, especially if there's structural damage to it, but it happens occasionally. It's really not something, but it's pretty rare, actually. Yeah.
So
Okay.
my question is, what was your background that got you into this fascinating business now?
Well, I was a English major with like medieval studies minor. Then I worked at an animal hospital where it was the best thing in my life because I met my wife there. But no, actually, there was a person who had a company, a friend of Diana's, and I'm 23 and opening the mail in Senator Mathias' office and getting a little tired of that, and they needed somebody to just carry art, and that's what I did. So here I am, 40 years later. Yes.
Sorry, I have the next one. Excuse me, two in a row. But on this whole thing, the process for origination and then the final, who approves finally, and how does it get to final approval?
Sure.
And who says go?
Right. So most when when it's a municipality, it really depends on the organization. Like Arlington County, there are so many levels of vetting internally that, yeah, most, and it's it's intentional. Arlington will give you a big long 50-page document saying, we'd really like you to give us the money and we'll figure out the art. And then page 7, why don't you just give us the money and we'll figure out the art? So this happens about 3 times, but a lot of developers are like, no, I want the value of the art on my site and, to own it. And, it doesn't matter which way. Arlington puts up really cool art on their own, on overpasses and in parks and all that kind of thing. Other municipalities like Rockville, they're like, you got to put in art. It's got to cost X amount of dollars. Go to town, And so there's no real curatorial. It's up to whatever the developer wants that fits their time frame and their budget. As you can imagine, a mural can get done in a couple of weeks. Fabricating some big sculpture and going through modeling process, might take 6-8 months. Not to mention, often we have to get approval before they even knock down the old building or break ground. So they might approve this piece of sculpture, but then we're not delivering it for 2 years just because there's no building or land to put it on yet. So there's kind of a hiatus. Oh, okay.
Oh. Is it on? Oh.
It's on.
I had a question about the vetting process, especially when municipalities are involved. Is there any prohibition against political statements? Because all of these things are very whimsical. That's my first question. The second one is, do you get any negative public feedback once these are installed?
Political would be rare. I've never done it, primarily because the people that are paying for it are selling something and they want to sell it to everybody. So I've never really, I've done paintings that are done internally in a sort of controlled environment that had, political aspects to them. But not in a sculpture. I mean, people used to just shy away from figurative work just because it may not be representative of a broad enough range of people and they didn't want to hear about that. So you're correct. Things tend to be more neutral. The whole temporary sculpture that's down on the mall that's been there a couple of weeks or whatever, that is not going to get paid for by somebody who's trying to sell apartment buildings because they're just that's not going to make people stay. So I can't really control that. And then what was your second question? Negative feedback. Yeah, occasionally people will like it or dislike it, I guess, for reasons that don't really have to do with the art. It's just their expectation of what used to be there, or perhaps what their conception of what they're thinking is going to be there. Um, but in general, people are mostly receptive to the public art that we've had experience with. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Hello, Mrs. Devine.
Do you ever have to install the art when the weather is poor?
Yes. The art. So here's another thing. That's a good question. Thank you. So a lot of times the people cannot call what's the owner of the building may not be able to get what's called their certificate of occupancy, which is a piece of paper that says people can move in and live there, or use the retail or whatever the use of the building is until the art's there. So if they're really pushing and they want to move tenants in next weekend, we're there on Saturday and Sunday putting this sculpture up. If it's pouring down rain, if it's freezing cold, they got to move their people in. So that does happen. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a big play structure that was designed by an artist, and it was a huge mud field, and it took us a long time to get the mud out of the way just to be able to drop the piece in place. So those are some of the constraints. It's always kind of that what I referred to earlier. We're waiting 18 months to install this thing, and then all of a sudden we got like 1 week to get it done. So that does happen on occasion.
I know it's not public art, but the new mural on 355 in Gaithersburg, across from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, where the new Aldi's has come in, is so much fun. They took the old MVA Express office and renovated that whole shopping center. I don't know the names of the streets, but it's on 355.
On Walnut Hill Shopping Center, right
That's
there.
it. That's it. And it's got this big roller coaster piece and another thing, and it's just gorgeous.
Well, that's great to hear.
And-
I haven't seen it in person. I've seen a picture of it.
Yeah, and you talk about public art, but that's stuff that somebody has to do to sell their apartment. This was just the owner of the shopping center, I guess, that paid have somebody put this tremendous mural all over the place. It's lovely.
Yeah, I mean it's bright. So the public art doesn't have to be mandated by someone necessarily. If you're just a supporter of the arts and you happen to own something, you could certainly do that.
Just painted, it would last about 20 years, maybe.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it depends on the kind of paint, but sure, it might not last any more than that. But that's a long time, and it's not gonna last as long as a sculpture, but they do get value out of it. You're talking about it in front of like 50 people, so that's right. Right, but I mean, it's something that catches your eye, right? And you're going to come in there, and whether you're going to the MBA or whether you're going to the shopping center or the horn replacement place around the corner, whatever, it's often has a lot of value. Okay, we're good. Jesse's giving me